Hi, I'm Jamie, your host for the Not Going to Uni podcast, where we talk all things emerging talent and alternative routes to university. Joining us for today's episode from BBC Radio, we have Sam, a production fast track apprentice. Hi Sam, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. You?
Yeah, all good, thanks. All good. Great to have you on. Do you want to give the audience a little introduction to yourself?
Hi, Jamie. I'm Sam. I work at BBC Radio Berkshire as a production apprentice. At college, I did a creative media course, and that sort of got me to where I am today, doing a bit of producing, bit of filming, bit of editing.
Amazing. Great. So can we dive a little bit deeper then into your journey? What got you to essentially BBC Radio, but also just thinking about kind of creative media as a whole?
Yeah, so I've always loved the behind the scenes videos, like after a film or on the DVDs when you get all the behind the scenes. That I've always been obsessed with how did they do that? How did they do this? So from quite a young age, I was always watching my dad take photos, and then I did photography for GCSE. I did a quite heavily filming and editing course at college, and then my tutors told me to apply for this sort of course, and it was completely down my alley, working out how they do the radio. And now I'm actually one of those people doing the radio, and then I'm always asking questions of how how do you do this? How do you do that? It's always just because I'm curious, I guess.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And what kind of drew you into radio specifically?
Nothing in particular, really. It was just how local the office was to where I live that I I was always thinking about going into TV and film if there was that opportunity at my age, but there wasn't really anything available. I applied for stuff, but this is the one that came out, and so I never really was a massive one to listening to radio. It was more podcasts, but this is what I had the opportunity to do, and I actually really like radio now. I'm not a massive listener, but more than I was when I started.
What are some of your favourite kind of podcasts at the moment?
I'm a Liverpool supporter, so
Oh God.
listen to a lot of Liverpool ones. I like Brett Goldstein's one, the guy from Ted Lasso, and they're like my main two. And not Stephen Mulhern, what's his name?
Stephen Bartlett.
Stephen Bartlett. I love his podcast.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. So, Sam, it sounds like you kind of wear multiple hats within BBC Radio. Talk to us a little bit about what does a typical day in the life look like for yourself?
So it it depends what I'm doing really. It's so good that no day's ever the same. Especially at the start, it was what can we get Sam doing today? It was always something different. I'm getting properly into sports social media sort of stuff. So anything Reading FC based, I'm on that. I edit the podcast. Any news that comes out, I'm the one making a post there. So that could be 8 in the morning, or it could be just before I leave for the end of the day. That's like an ongoing thing that is always in the back of my head. But at the moment, I'm doing a lot of the breakfast show with Andrew Peach, with Tuesday to Thursday. That's a very early start. I'm in the office just after 5:30,
Wow.
and that show's on for 4 hours between 6 and 10. And then after, so we're producing. I'm taking any calls. I'm getting. I'm trying to get the guests on, and we call them respins, where there might be a 2 minute interview, and then I've got to clip that up, write a little cue to go in for the presenter, then play that later in the show. And then it just goes into a little break, and then we start planning the next show the next day.
Oh, amazing. What's kind of your favourite part to that?
I enjoy the producing. I'm getting quite into that. I love there's always something to do. You're never just sat there. You're just always thinking, what's happening next? Okay, we've got a song. Okay, now it's the weather. Now it's the travel. Okay, now we've got this guest and we've got to get them up. There's always something to do with that. Whereas when you're planning, I I always get a bit scared when I'm calling people just in case, because I'm not an expert in all this stuff. It because our show is all news focused, so I'm not an expert in. I don't know what we're doing at the moment. We've had a lot of stuff on mental health and stuff like that. I'm not an expert in that, so I feel like calling someone up and I'm always pretending to be like, "Oh, I know exactly what you're doing," when actually I've got no clue. I find at the moment, and then you're convincing them to come on the show at like 7 in the morning. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to go on the radio at 7 in the morning if I had a choice.
Uh,
So yeah, that's probably the worst bit, I think.
and has that essentially led to you experiencing some imposter syndrome?
Yes, I definitely felt that, especially over the first couple of weeks, thinking, "What am I doing here?" I I've always sort of thought about it, and then getting here, I felt out of place a lot at the start, and that might have something to do with my age as well. I didn't go to university. I I'm probably one of very few in our office not to go to uni, so I've always sort of felt underqualified in a way, but I think I'm slowly proving that to other people and to myself that I'm not actually underqualified. I do have a place here.
Yeah, and were your team and were the individuals around you quite reassuring of that as well?
I think because I never listened to radio, I think that's where the fear sort of came from. Is that I never really listened to radio. I've never really thought about radio much. That I felt out of place there, but I got into filming and editing, and I probably showed some of them what I can do when I'm in my comfort zone, when I know what I'm doing. So that was the start of growing their confidence, and then getting into stuff that I don't know, and then proving myself there. That's where the main confidence comes from.
Amazing. So, talk to us a little bit about your kind of journey when you were kind of going through the application stage with BBC. I mean, I imagine there's going to be a lot of potential apprentices going to be applying for same role as you or similar roles, whether that be in BBC, but also outside of that, within the industry. Have you got any kind of insight as to what that process looked like and any tips for our audience that you could maybe give them?
One tip I would say is understand it a bit more, understand what roles you're applying for, because I sort of went in, I just chucked my name in the hat and didn't really think much of it. I think it's good to get as many applications into different places. You never know where you end up. But do your research at the same time. That when I applied, there was a massive tick box of all the places you wanted to apply for this. So I applied for Radio Berkshire. I think I applied for all the ones in London, and I'm not very good at geography. I clicked all the ones in Salford as well, thinking they were in London. To make sure you do your research because I might have been travelling to Manchester every week.
And were they quite? Was it a case of that? Was the BBC the one local to yourself? Was that the only one you essentially got through, or was that just a more of a preference in terms of location?
Don't I don't know actually. It it could have been this is the only one I got through for. It might be based slightly on location. This
Yeah.
is the one I got given the interview for at the end of the day.
Okay. And what did that application process look like from start to finish?
So the first bit there was your CV, all your normal sort of application stuff, and then there was two questions that you had to record an answer for. So it's have your camera on and record a 90-second answer to. I think it was something along the lines of what's a TV show or film you're passionate in? I think it was something along those lines. And and they I waited ages. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but the wait was quite a while. It was 2 or 3, 4 months
Oh
before I
well.
even heard a response. And then there was another thing which was like rank your personality like 1 to 5, and that was really good actually. You got instant feedback from like a computer, and then it got to a phone. I got a phone call asking me to have an interview, and that was with the top 3 for each local radio station, and that was quite scary. It was actually my first interview because with lockdown and everything, I didn't really have much chance for applications for any other jobs. And the one thing I'd say with that is try and get a bit of practice in with a parent, a guardian, a friend, anyone that can just sort of ask you some sort of tricky questions to get you thinking about how you'd answer that, and even just learning how to waffle to sort of while you're waffling, thinking of a good answer to get to the question.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thanks, Sam. And anyone looking to get into the radio industry, is there any specific advice for the industry that like kind of knowledge that you've obtained and could give out to any individual looking to get into radio?
I think know what sort of radio you want to get into. Like our breakfast show is quite news focused. Then you've got our mid morning is very music and personality driven. Like you've got to work out what sort of radio you like to listen to, what you think your skills might be best suited for. That it's all well and good saying radio, but you've got no different to the genre of film. You've got that sort of genre in radio, but I don't think, at least me going into it, I didn't realize that there was so much different genres into radio.
So yeah, just understand a bit more about specifically what areas of radio you're interested in and
Yeah.
follow that from there. Okay, cool. In terms of the opportunities that your apprenticeship has provided you, but mainly the skills that you've kind of learnt and gained whilst being on the program, what have they been so far?
Talking to people, getting experience on air. I've done a few things on air or pre-recorded that. That's something I didn't think I'd get here. Uh, Lots of audio editing. That's the main thing. That from day one, my manager was like, "You're going to be the best audio editor in this office. We're going to get you trained up. We're going to send you." I got sent on some apprentice training to go and do more audio editing. That I don't think I'm quite the best yet. We're getting there. That it's just that's the main thing that I've learned is how to edit audio and how learning brand guidelines. That's something I've never had to deal with before. So working out, especially with the BBC being public service and all that, they've got quite tight guidelines you have to follow, and
Yeah.
it's been a bit of a learning curve working out what I can and can't do. But that's been really interesting to learn.
Okay, great. And what's been the biggest challenge in your apprenticeship to date?
Biggest challenge, I think, my first day doing producing, it was on Easter Monday. I got the call up the night before saying, "Sam, we're really desperate for staff. The producer's just called in sick and you're literally my only hope." And so I had to produce two shows in a row on my own with just the presenter and not a lot of content to go with. And that was my first time probably producing, definitely on my own. And that was a sleepless night, as well as getting up at 5 in the morning. And that was a big challenge, just because I was doubting myself. I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And luckily the show went pretty well. There was obviously a couple faults, but I don't think the what we always say is, as long as the listener doesn't know, we're all good. There's a lot of things that I could be panicking, I could be crying, I could be shouting at the presenter, but as long as the listener doesn't know, then we'll be all good.
Yeah, and no, that's really great. And what have you kind of, what would you tell your kind of younger self if you were to? I mean, you're still young. This isn't me calling you old by any means. But any kind of younger listeners to yourself, what advice would you kind of give them, having been now in the role for a little while and you've kind of experienced those sort of challenges and you've probably now got the confidence to go and do that again? Like, what advice would you give in terms of taking opportunities and gaining your confidence like that?
I'm gonna go back a couple years to little Sam doing his GCSEs, and just like keep working. I was never great at exams, but I never really revised. So when I started revising and saw the results, I think that was definitely a start of the confidence going up. So I would have just said, just keep it going, keep working hard, keep grafting and putting those hours in, and it will work out eventually. Don't doubt yourself. They're the two things I'd say to myself.
And looking ahead then to kind of the next 3, 4, 5 years, I mean, do you think that far ahead? Have you got kind of a goal or a particular role or a career that you kind of want to pursue?
My apprenticeship finishes in March next year, so I've not got long left. I'm about halfway through. I'm applying for jobs here just for that job security. I've got an interview on Tuesday, so hopefully that goes well.
Nice. What's that doing? Is that basically doing what you do now, just not an apprentice, or?
Yeah, so it would be producing Monday to Friday rather than just less hours. I still work a Monday and Friday, but I do other things. So it'd just be a continued, we call it journalism coordinator. It just means you're like co-producer.
Okay, and I guess longer term, so the next kind of 5-10 years, like have you got a career? Have you got something that you look at and go, I'd really like to be that person, or I'd really like to get to that point in my career?
Thought it was film and TV, getting on TV sets, but doing all the stuff with Reading FC, I do the podcast. I'd love to get into Match of the Day. That is the dream at the moment, to get into Salford, into Manchester. Definitely more up north than I thought before. Uh, but getting on the sports team, I'm loving the sports social media. So anything to do with that, it might not be at the BBC, it could be somewhere else, but that is sort of the goal at the moment, and hopefully that I will get there someday.
Yeah. Well, amazing. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today, Sam. You've been really great insight to the role in radio. I've learned a lot about about things I didn't know. So thank you so much for joining. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out each episode on your chosen streaming platform and head over to the Not Going to Uni website to start your future career.